Welcome, everybody, to the Hockey Think Tank podcast, brought to you by the Hockey Think Tank. A place for all passionate players, parents, and coaches to go to get a little bit of education and a little bit of inspiration regarding the greatest game on the planet. Sorry, didn't get the big U today. Little voice is a little hurting right now, a little sick. So tried it the first time, voice cracked big time. But today's going to be a little bit of a different episode anyway. My compadre, Jeffrey Jehu Lavecchio, is on vacation. And so we brought in the squad. The two people that I work with the most on a day-to-day level. And we are going to talk some youth hockey here today. I am so excited to bring these two on. And we'll give a little bit of a background in just a second. But Matt Thomas and Steph Dukeshare, these are the two. We work with youth organizations all throughout North America, and we've learned so much in the past 2.5 years of doing this together, and can't wait to share what we've learned with all of you guys here today. So without further ado, let's introduce the two people that make the Hockey Think Tank go, Matt Thomas and Steph Dukes. We are chivalrous on this podcast, so we're going to start with you, Steph. Steph, you are a hockey mom. You have a daughter that's playing college hockey. You have a son that played U18 AAA hockey last year. And you also have helped run youth organizations in your time as a hockey mom and even not being a hockey mom. So, Steph, a little bit of an introduction for you. How excited are you to be on here today? And tell us a little bit about your journey of how you got to the Hockey Think Tank.
Well, it's weird being on this side of the podcast, I'll tell you, because my journey to the Hockey Think Tank started as your producer, your first. I hold great pride in that title, even though our current day-to-day producer, Laura, far superior in many ways as a producer.
I don't know about that. I should say too, the reason that Steph became a part of the Hockey Think Tank podcast is when I got the job in Michigan, I was like, I cannot do all of this back end stuff on my own. And so we put a note out there on social media. Hey, is anybody wanting to be a part of this as our producer? And Pat Ferschweiler, who is the head coach of the reigning national champions, Western Michigan Broncos, he reached out to Vex and I and was like, you don't even need to put a note out there. I got someone for you. And so we were like, all right. And so we talked to Steph, and after about a half an hour to an hour of a conversation, we were like, yep, Fersch is right. Let's go. Giddy up. And so here Steph is, and now she's with us doing a lot more than just podcast producing. So sorry to interrupt you there, but
no worries.
That backstory.
No worries. Yeah, I, as you mentioned, hockey mom. My daughter's college career, playing career, just ended. My son is finished with youth hockey, looking at all the. I'm literally living the uncertainty of what does junior hockey look like next year for him. And then, like you said, youth hockey organization. I mean, I worked with our local org here in Southwest Michigan for 11, 12 years as an administrator, as a hockey mom, as a coach's wife, all the things. So I love having made the transition from podcast producing to what we get to do, because it's really fueled my passion for making the youth hockey experience for everybody as good as it can be, both players and families, but coaches and the volunteers that make the youth hockey world go round. So that's what I'm passionate about. As somebody that did not grow up playing hockey, but shinny on the lake with my brothers. I was a ski racer and a gymnast, but I still am a huge advocate for people that say, I didn't do youth hockey. I didn't grow up in hockey. So they say that as a negative in what they can bring to the table from the experience part. And I tell them sometimes that's our cape.
There you go. Also, your brother played with Jeffrey Jehu Lavecchio at Western Michigan too.
Yes, did play with Jehu.
Small world. All right. And then in our right corner, we have Matt Thomas, former Division I coach, former hockey director. We heard the Washington Little Caps, naval officer. This guy's a jack of all trades. Matty, aside from the fact that when you called me and our first conversation, you actually had bad information about what was going on in my world, which eventually spurned into us working together. Talk a little bit about your journey here, and grew up in Southern New Hampshire, so you know that Boston area well, and went to St. Paul's, to the Naval Academy. Talk about your hockey journey to get here.
Oh yeah, world traveler. Sorry again about that phone call. I had some bad gouge, but yeah, played growing up in New Hampshire. My father was a referee, on ice official, and old WCHA, minor pro, IHF, the build up to the 80 Olympics and all that. So hockey was definitely in the bloodstream. He had played goaltender before helmets. So, getting us into the game, born in Wisconsin, the move to New Hampshire was actually what got me into the game. Our town, Wisconsin, didn't have hockey. But grew up in New England playing up there back when, prep was the roadmap to college hockey. And the sports gods had some other ideas. They made me a better lacrosse player than a hockey player. They got me to the Naval Academy and migrated back to hockey once I got there, and enjoyed that period of my life immensely. But got back into coaching near the end of my naval career. You and I think, lived sort of parallel lives there for a while. You were at Cornell when I was at Denver and Huntsville, and I know we'd see each other in the rinks and all that, and we were friendly. But it wasn't until sort of years later, I think, after our youth hockey experience, that we reconnected again with some bad intel on my part. But it was great to see where the crossroads you were at. I was there too, and it's been really fun the last 3 years to build up the enterprise here and keep the lights on. I am
there. You go.
I'm the left brain to your right brain, the yin to your yang, the salt to your pepper. The face made for radio. So let's go. Let's do it.
Well, I have the face made for podcasting. Vex has the face made for, social media, the front facing stuff. But yeah, pumped to talk with everybody here today. And we're going to talk about the 5 biggest things that we've learned this past year in youth hockey. And again, we work with organizations all throughout North America pretty extensively. And we have a blast doing it. We have an absolute blast doing it. We've learned so much from the organizations that we partner with, hopefully as much as they've learned from us. And that's the really cool thing, is we can take things from the different partners that we work with and use them with the other ones. And it's just a very collaborative effort. And so we're going to take you through our 5 biggest things that we've learned this year. And first, though, we do have some people to thank for allowing us to do this. And to start off, we're going to go with our title sponsor, icehockeysystems.com, the best website out there for all of your coaching education needs, but not just coaching education needs anymore, because they have family accounts. So if you are a parent or you are a player, they have a product for you. If you're a coach, thousands of drills, whiteboard explanations from really high level hockey people, ability to go in and draw your drills up. We've partnered with them to do an associations platform where you can get this for every single coach in your organization. Guys, absolute value add. No better product in the market than icehockeysystems.com. So go to icehockeysystems.com today and check that out. Also want to thank Helios Hockey. Helios Hockey is a product. It is a sensor that you put into your shoulder pads that gives you real-time data, real-time feedback on your play, particularly 2 things. One, which is all the kids absolutely love it, is a hustle score. Every time you move, that sensor lights up and it gives you a hustle score for what you're doing on the ice. The kids absolutely love that, but also it's a great tool for skating development and gives you some great feedback, gives you some great developmental tools to work on your skating. If you want to be an elite hockey player today, skating is a big part of that with how fast the game has gotten. So go to helioshockey.com and use the coupon code ThinkTank, one word, and you will get a 20% discount on your pro annual or your pro 24-month subscription. What I didn't mention yet is the absolute game changer that Helios has, and that is the ability to sync up with your video, whether it is LiveBarn or it's an iPad, an iPhone, a camera, whatever it may be. It syncs up with that, and you can get your shifts cut up for you directly after every game that you play. Just an absolute value add, time saver for all you guys out there. So go to helioshockey.com today and check that out. Also want to thank Crossbar. Crossbar is a one-stop shop software solution that can help you to really streamline the operations of your youth hockey club. So what do they have? A very, very easy to use website design, both on the front facing and on the back end, 5-star communication app to communicate with your families, the ability to have reporting for financial stuff, for rink management, volunteer management, guys, one-stop shop. Everybody that I know that has made the switch over to Crossbar has been very, very happy that they did. It has made life so much easier, particularly for boards and presidents and hockey directors. And those are some of the things we're going to be talking about today. How can we make those people's lives a little bit easier? How can we make everybody's lives in youth hockey a little bit easier? And we're going to talk a lot about that with the 5 things that we've learned. Also, want to thank all of our amazing listeners. We love you guys so much and appreciate all the support that you've given us. If you think what we're doing is a positive add to the hockey world, if you can, help us to get the word out by liking, commenting, downloading, shooting us ratings and reviews, following us wherever you can on your podcast apps, whether that's Google Play, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes. We are everywhere. Every time you interact with our podcast, it goes into that whole algorithm thing that we know nothing about, but certainly helps to get in other people's ears. So we love you guys. If you could do that for us, we would really, really appreciate it. And with that, we're going to get going to our podcast here today with Matt and Steph on the 5 biggest things that we've learned in youth hockey, working with all of our partner clubs. So there's 5 things, guys. 5 things that we're going to go through here today. Number 1, and this is probably the biggest source of stress for any youth association out there, tryouts. How do we think about tryouts? Whether we are the leadership and the coaches of a club, whether we are parents and we have some stress about what's going on with tryouts. Tryouts seems to be the biggest source of stress, or one of the biggest sources of stress. So we're going to talk a lot about tryouts, number 1. The second thing, parent education and how important parent education is. This is something where we feel like, just from a macro level, we need to do a much better job on educating parents about the game of hockey 101 type stuff, but also the journey, the path, how to help your son or your daughter kind of navigate this sport that is delivered to families so much differently than a lot of the other sports out there. So parent education, that is the next big thing that we are going to talk about. The third big thing is communication. This is very, very hard for a lot of the clubs, either that we partner with or that we talk to and get questions from all the time. Is like, how do we best communicate with the different clubs in our, or with the different families, with the different coaches that are in our ecosystem? It's a huge one. It's an absolutely huge one. And we're going to go a couple different ways as it relates to the communication piece. But that's the third thing that we're going to talk about. Fourth thing that we're going to talk about is continue to play. There's learn to play. Then there's, I don't really know. And then there's like club hockey. So, one of the things that we've learned in all of the work that we do is that, house league hockey, rec hockey, whatever you want to call it, in a lot of different places is dying. And we think that that's a big part of the reason why our retention numbers within hockey aren't where they need to be from a macro level. And so how can we help clubs, and how can clubs help themselves and their families by thinking about a little bit more of a continue to play model? We're going to talk a lot about that. How do we get kids from learn to play, learn to skate into the club pipeline? And then lastly, the youth hockey board. We've learned a lot about the youth hockey board. We've worked with some amazing boards this year. We get a lot of questions, and we've just learned a ton about board continuity, board onboarding, how much of an effect, both from a positive and a negative standpoint, the board and leadership can have on the operations and the culture of a club. And so we're going to talk about a lot of what we've learned as it relates to a healthy and functioning board. So with that, again, just to start from the beginning, tryouts, parent education, communication within the club, a continue to play model, and then an efficient board. Those are the 5 things that we're going to grasp. But first, and most importantly, the biggest source of stress in youth hockey today, tryouts. Tryouts. So, Matt, let's go to you first on this one. tryouts, just give me a couple things that you see maybe clubs not doing well, and then a couple things that you've seen or you've done as a hockey director that you think really help push the needle forward from a positive standpoint as it relates to tryouts.
Well, I think the clubs that struggle, organizations that struggle, are typically struggling in one of two ways. They either have a disconnected cultural alignment, what they claim to be about, their mission, their vision, the experience they want to provide. The tryout is disconnected from that. It is not reminiscent of their marketing and the things they say and purport to do.
Can you give an example? Like, what does that mean?
Well, if we say we're about development, then I think you should make your tryout a development experience. If you say you're about winning and banners, then I think that maybe loosens the leash a little bit to some of the sideways behavior we see this time of year. If you say you're about community, then I think that invites a different set of values into the tryout experience. So, making sure that your process, which is the next thing I'm going to, is connected to that vision, that mission, I think is really important. And again, that second thing is, do you have a process? Do you have something that's repeatable, objective, fair, collaborative, transparent? And I'm going to clarify on that word because it gets thrown around kind of loosely when it comes to trials. When I say transparent, I mean in the sense that the process is known to the participants. Parents are not going to be invited into the selection committee room to hear them pick the teams. That's not what we mean by transparent, but transparent in the sense that I know what I'm getting into, that this process is known to me as a participant, as a parent. So that process piece, I if your process is we're going to let all the head coaches pick their teams uniquely, you're going to get a very different experience for each group.
Yeah, for sure. And then Steph, on your end, you've been on the admin side of a lot of different trial processes in your day. What are some of the things that you've seen, both from a positive and a negative standpoint, in running tryouts?
Maddie nailed it really with the tryouts are about process, transparency, culture. I absolutely agree with what he said about transparency. I know we're going to talk about communication a little bit later, but communication really hits on everything. And there's probably no greater area where communication is important than the tryout process, because it's such an anxious time for everyone. I think being able to have a process, whatever that is, and however you define it for your club, but really being able to replicate that year over year. If you're not going to communicate the why, here's how we did it last year, here's how it is going to be better this year, or this is how we think it can be better. So really communicating the expectation. You as a club, you really have the responsibility of setting the expectation so that you control the culture piece of it. That requires a lot more than what I just said. It requires a lot more alignment. It requires, really being able to have clear evaluation criteria. To Matt's point, it doesn't mean the parents are going to be invited in, but if you can show them, these are the kinds of things we're talking about. You've got a committee of people that are doing it, as opposed to just your coach, which of course is going to invite the politics narrative. It'll create more drama. So in order to have really the cleanest process possible, being able to, I'm going to double down on everything Maddie said, being able to really communicate what that process is and make it repeatable. And that doesn't mean that the best 15 kids, the best 17 kids are going to make the team all the time, because first of all, that's subjective. But also it's not, as we all know, it's not always about you're just taking the best kids. You're taking the kids that fill in the blank, how are they going to be best in this situation? But really being able to communicate that and have a process that supports that and have a board that's aligned with that. That's really what sets the process up for success for the healthiest clubs.
Yeah, I think when you look at it in a couple different ways from both sides of the spectrum, you have the biggest stress for parents is a lack of everything that you guys just talked about: lack of transparency, lack of the understanding of expectations, lack of understanding of the process of what goes on behind the scenes to make the teams. And then on the other side, on like the leadership coaches, board side, their biggest stress is parents who don't care about expectations or, they're just looking at their kid. And so I'd love to ask you guys a question on both of those fronts. If you are a parent who feels like your kid got slighted, which there are a ton of them out there, it's tryout time right now for whether it's spring tryouts or whether it's tryouts for next year, depending on where you live. I've gotten a lot of notes from different hockey directors being like, parents are freaking crazy. We feel like we've laid it out for everybody and they just either don't get it or don't care and they're just seeing their kid. How would you as a, let's go to the parent side first. You feel like your kid did not get the right end of the spectrum and you don't feel like the club has been transparent in their process. What do you do as a parent who is frustrated with the tryout process? Also with the understanding that a lot of parents feel if you say something, then your kid he's going to get blackballed for it. So Maddie, why don't we go to you first for that one on the parent side?
Boy,
what do you do?
I think some hardship is baked into this experience. We've all had those frustrating moments to go back to the drawing board and say, I gotta get better. I hope that it's a temporary perception issue and not a fundamental unfairness issue. I'm a parent of three little girls who are playing hockey that haven't really been in a competitive tryout environment yet, but I can certainly point thumbs before I point fingers. I could imagine walking out of the rink and, looking for someone to blame. But again, hopefully with time and some deep breaths, you can walk away from that and say that maybe there's a bigger lesson here. Maybe there's an opportunity here to fuel some growth. So I hope that it's not fundamentally unfair. If you feel it is, then it is fair to ask questions along the lines of the process that the organization takes with their tryouts. I think it's in the organization's best interest to be front facing with a lot of things we're talking about, and to treat tryouts in a lot of cases as a developmental opportunity. So I'm shifting into the leadership side, but on the parent side, I would embrace it as an opportunity to fill your gas tank a little bit.
I agree with you, man. I think that's so important. And I think even if you do feel like it's unfair, that is not something you communicate with your child. Like, we do not need more excuse maker people in our world. We want people who take accountability, and so that's where I feel like, and I was cut in Pee Wee. I've been cut quite a few times in my career and still had a career that I'm extremely, extremely proud of. And I would even venture a guess to say that part of the reason why I was successful is because I got kicked in the what and had to learn how to work a little bit harder, find a way. And so I think that's great advice there. And then if you do feel like you don't have a great understanding of the process of what was going on why your kid got cut, there's a way to approach a coach or a hockey director in the right way where you ask for feedback. What can they do to be better? What was the process like? And it's not going in with excuses and you should have and these kinds of things. It's asking questions, and you might not get the answers you want. That's also a thing. And then you can reevaluate the next year on whether or not this is a program that fits the needs of what you want for your kid. But at the end of the day, not everybody's going to be happy at tryout times. If you're not, make sure the kid understands that they got to control what they can control, and they can't control how a coach thinks of them. They can control their attitude and their willingness and ability to get better. And so I think it's great, man. I think it's great. And then if you do have questions, there's a way to go about asking those questions.
And what you just mentioned, the feedback piece, the communication side that Steph spoke to, I've heard recently, and it's in danger of becoming a cliche if we don't unpack it. But tryouts are development. Okay, but I hope that's the case, that an organization is taking that approach. But are we doing our part to make it a development opportunity? Having a great on ice plan is part of it, but then what happens next? A big disconnect that we see is the feedback piece. Following up with players, let them know why they didn't make a team that they wanted to make, why they were cut or placed on a lower team. Even the kids who maybe surprised themselves and made a great team, following up with that kid and letting them know what they did well, where they need to continue to grow. That fuels development. It's a terrific communication and mentorship opportunity with parents, especially first generation parents who are still learning the game themselves. If you aren't doing some sort of feedback process with your participants, it's really a lost opportunity to close the loop on the developmental value of the experience. Steph talked a lot about communication. I think that's a communication blind spot in a lot of tryouts right now.
Yeah, totally. So let's go to the other side then. What can the leadership group of a club do to ensure that their process is right? Especially when parents are not sure or questioning what's going on. Steph, let's go to you.
Great points there, Maddie. And actually, I just thought of this analogy when we were on a call not too long ago. The tryout process, both for parents and the club, but really the club, if you think about the tryout process as a golf swing, right? Whatever the pulling it, I'm not a golfer, but your backswing is as important as it sets up what's going to happen next, right? So when you're coming down to approach the ball, if the tryouts themselves are the ball, a lot of clubs stop there. And I know, because my dad's a really good golfer and my brother's a really good golfer, that your follow through is just as important as what happens to initiate the swing. So if you think about, as an organization, that's your pendulum, right? It's not just what you're doing leading up to tryouts or striking the ball. It's as important, and in some cases more important, for the development of your club, for the retention, for the growth, for the culture piece, for all of that. Your follow through is just as important. So what does that process look like for your families? What are you telling them it's going to look like? What are you asking that of your coaches? What are you asking of your hockey director? All of those pieces are important in order to have reduced drama, increased accountability. All of those things go to, clear evaluation criteria, clear communication after on what's next, whether that's here's what you did really well, here are the things you need to work on, whatever that looks like, but multiple ways to have thoughtful communication and intentional communication before and after the tryout for all things. That goes a long way in making sure your tryouts are the culture piece to your club that they should be.
Love that. So just to put a bow on this, I had these written down here, but 4 things when running a tryout that could really lead to a good, well-executed tryout, but also happy customers, happy families, happy kids, parents, all. So no, and you guys have hit on pretty much all of these. Number 1, transparency. The more transparent and open you are about the process. And again, like Matt said, we're not inviting parents into the room as coaches are deliberating on which team is which, but transparency and how the process is going to work. Huge, absolutely huge. Number 2, objectivity. If you can find a way to bring objectivity into your evaluation, that can hold a lot from the feedback standpoint. This is where your kid scored on X, Y, and Z as it related to speed, shot, stick handling through cones, but also objectivity. And I think coaches should certainly have the biggest say in who's on their team, but you need people in the room that aren't a part of that team to also give feedback on how kids are playing. So inviting other coaches from the association in, inviting people that have nothing to do with your organization in, to really bring more evaluators that don't necessarily know the kids or the families, and they're just objectively stating who they feel are the top players and who aren't. So having a sense of objectivity, I think, can go a long way. The third thing, and you guys just nailed it, is feedback. You have to provide feedback at the end of the tryout as to why a kid is placed in a certain way from a developmental standpoint. What are the things that they need to work on to get better through the year? But having a touch point with the kid and their parents, especially if the kid is young, on, this is why you are where you are, and these are the things that you're doing great. These are the things that you need to work on. It goes a long way for the families to understand why their kid was put on a certain team for the good or maybe the not so good. And then the last thing that I'll put on here that we didn't necessarily talk about, but maybe this is just my opinion, but I think having some variability to tryouts, the on-ice portion of it, I think is good. And so don't just scrimmage 5-on-5 for 3 days if your tryout is 3 days long. Maybe you have one day that's a skills day, maybe you have one day that's a small area games day, and maybe you have one day that's a scrimmage day. And so the skills day, you can do your objective stuff. This is how fast you skate. This is how fast you can go around cones with a puck or without a puck. It's how hard your shot is. Those objective type of measures that can kind of give you a skill sense of where kids are at. Small area games gives you a sense of hockey sense, gives you a sense of competitiveness. Those are things that we're looking to develop in our players. And then the 5-on-5, what do they actually look like when they're playing a game of hockey, which is what the kids are going to be doing throughout the year. So having a little bit of variability to the actual hockey-centric part of your tryout, I think could be helpful too. So hopefully these are things, whether you're a parent, whether you are in club leadership, that can help you, things that we've learned from partnering with a lot of great clubs around North America that you can use. So let's put a bow on the trial part and move to the next one, which is parent education. Parent education. This, I think we could all agree, is one of the biggest missed opportunities to make our game better and make the experience better for not just our parents, but for the coaches who have to deal with the parents all the time too. I think if you talk to any youth hockey coach, they will tell you that their biggest stress is parents. I think if you talk to any youth hockey parent, their biggest stress is either the coach or they don't understand this whole crazy youth hockey journey, particularly if they didn't grow up with the sport. And so, Steph, we'll start with you on this one, as you have a lot more experience being a hockey parent than both Matt and I. But what are some things that you've seen both as a hockey parent and now as somebody who is heavily invested into educating hockey parents? What do you see? Let's start with kind of like the things that you've seen clubs do or not do that aren't very good. And then we'll get to some of the things that they've done that you think could be a huge value add to everybody listening.
Well, not only am I a hockey parent, and not only have I been on the club side a long time, I was both simultaneously, which is a unique perspective, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting place to be.
It's an interesting place to be, right? And this sentence might make some administrators and hockey directors furrow their brow for a second, but let me unpack it. And it's, parents aren't the problem, confusion is. Parents aren't the problem, confusion is. And so in the epitome of pointing thumbs, not fingers, a lot of the problems arise because if parents aren't being communicated to in the right way, in an effective way, and they don't know what's going on, they'll make it up. It'll get made up in the stands. It'll get made up in the lobbies. It'll get made up in the parking lot. And that goes for anything. Tryouts, which I know we just talked about, but anything, development, culture. If you're not shouting from the rooftops as a club who you are and what you're about, your parents will make up their own version of it. That's human nature. So most parents want to do the right thing, but youth hockey is confusing. So if you're in an area where, whether it's a first generation hockey parent or somebody that grew up in the game, both of those come with their own bags to unpack. And as an administrator, you're trying to unpack those bags simultaneously. And that's hard. And as a result of that, if parents, if you can help them understand the process, your culture, the accountability structure, if you can help them understand all of that, generally behavior improves. I'm not going to make broad sweep, I'm using a pretty broad brush here, and I understand that. But, there's likely less sideline coaching. There's less, the car ride home can become a little bit more positive. Less anxiety maybe about playing time. And that's it. It's not just from the club directly to the parents, it's from the club down. And that means from the club to your, from the leadership down to your coaches, down to your team managers, down to your parents, down to your players. I mean, that's the pyramid we're talking about. So it's not jumping from one place to the next. It's really having that continuity flow, culture flow, that will help improve the experience for everybody involved, the people setting the tone, the culture, and the messaging, but all the way down to the parents and players.
Yeah, makes sense. Maddie, let me ask you this, just a question that pops in my mind. And you were a hockey director for a long time and obviously work with a lot of hockey directors now. Kind of taking what Steph said, what's your thought process on the message from the top filtering all the way down and having some things that are tried and true that, every coach, every team should kind of follow, but also giving some autonomy to coaches to kind of coach in the way that they want to coach. So you think about philosophies on like ice time, you think about philosophy of off ice, you think about philosophy on, structure, systems, tactics, things like that. How do you best as a leadership group with how you're setting the tone for your organization, kind of have some things that, hey, this is what we're all doing, and then some things that you're giving autonomy to the coaches? How do you best as a leadership group kind of try to thread that needle? And I know that's really, really hard and isn't necessarily talking about parent education right now, but just something that came to mind as I heard Steph talking.
Yeah, so coaching education, and just like parent education, I think it's an ongoing process, and I think they're similar in nature. And in a lot of clubs, you're sensitive to your coach's free time, the same way you're sensitive to parents getting inundated with emails. I mean, they're similar groups, very different agents, within the organizational structure, but most of your coaches are probably parents as well, at least in a lot of our partners. I would take the same approach with coaches that I take with parents, and that's framing education as support, not correction. Right? Take the starch out of that whole like mandate vibe, mandatory training, HR type stuff. So that we're here to support. We're here to provide resources. Focusing on the why. Again, zoom out is usually the answer to the nuance thing that's ailing you. Focus on the why. What's the big picture here? As you're trying to meet where there's a disconnect, as you're trying to get back to alignment with your mission, focus on the why. I think making it continuous, digestible, seasonal, ongoing, not immersive. Like, all right, this week there's a parents meeting every night and that'll solve our problems for the year. No, just got to space it out a little bit. Got to be, a steady, low dose diet. Same way with your coaches, right? You're not going to get them for 6 hours on a Wednesday night, but you can get them a half hour once every couple of weeks. Same way with your parents. It takes that immersion, that preaching atmosphere out of the equation. And then sort of aligned with the why, I'd say emphasize shared goals, right? Like what we want as an end state with this experience. So whether it's ice time or player deployment or, how deep is your doghouse as a coach, or, all the things that hockey directors inevitably get asked about, maybe because every coach has his own style. As you attempt to maybe coach that coach into your organizational philosophy, your mission, where do we want to end up at the end of the season? What are we trying to provide this player and this group? And in most instances, hopefully it's a lifelong love of the game and a passion to continue to play. We're going to talk about it in a little bit, but retention, keeping these kids in the game and having fun. That's a huge piece of it. So, there are times where you maybe have to pull a coach aside, but generally I think you can get out in front of a lot of those issues. Again, full circle here, by having a steady strain curriculum-based approach to who is talking to your parents. Steph, you said it earlier, if you don't tell them, they're going to invent a way. My oldest daughter, I taught her how to tie her shoes. My middle daughter drafted right behind her and was in a race to catch her. My third one, I guess I forgot. I didn't get the memo. And God bless her, she's taught herself an interesting way to tie her shoes. And it takes me about an hour and a half to untie her shoes every night. So, I hate to equate every hockey parent to my youngest daughter, who's freeloading off of her sisters right now. But if you don't teach them the way, they will invent one. Every coach lives and dies by that motto. Everything is either taught or allowed to happen. I think when it comes to parent education, it's a huge missed opportunity across all sports at the youth level right now for a variety of reasons. But at its core, it's a cost fallacy. It's an opportunity cost fallacy. We look only at the cost of doing something and fail to consider the cost of not doing something. Mm-hmm. And not doing something puts you in a position where your parents are going to define their experience. And you're not going to have a voice in that equation.
As an administrator, I used to cringe every time we called it parent education, because I believed then and believe now it's really parent partnership, right? You're still, and phrasing matters. Oftentimes parents, especially if they're parents that have been in the sport, they don't really take kindly to folks saying, you need to be educated on this thing. I possess the knowledge and here I'm going to share it with you. Some are okay with that, but the phrasing matters. And really the bottom line is, when parents understand the journey, they become partners instead of critics. So if you right out of the gate are phrasing it that way, hey, we want to be partners, so this is the best experience possible, it really sets the mindset for everybody. That this is a partnership in a journey. This isn't a transactional service we're providing. It is to some degree, but when you're phrasing it that way, the outcomes are generally more positive.
All right. So no longer is it parent education, it is parent partnerships. There we go. Yeah. And I think just to put a bow on this, I think we would all agree, the more time and effort you invest into this stuff, the better the experience everybody's going to have. And that includes you as an administrator, who's not going to be taking so many phone calls, because you're not going to have parents that are going to be making up stuff, in their head, because they just don't know. they just don't know. And so, but that also is an ongoing thing. I think a lot of clubs, parent education, parent partnership, it's a box they need to check at the beginning of the year, where it's like, okay, we're going to do our 30-minute meeting with every parent group at the beginning of the year, and then we're done. Then the parents should just know. Well, that's not the case. Having a strong, preseason parent meeting is 100% very important. But then what's the follow-up? Right? Like, whether it's once a month, whether you do town halls where parents can, voice their concerns or ask their questions, whether it's, and that's another thing too, is like, as administrators or hockey directors, stop being so mad when parents reach out to you with questions. Hockey's a confusing sport, and sometimes, yes, 100%, they're crazy parents and you've told them 90 times and they're just not listening. Be mad at those ones. But like, if you have this like environment that you've created where parents like don't feel like there's an open door policy and they're scared to like voice their opinions, your retention rate's going to suck. Like, they're going to leave because they don't feel supported, and so if parents have questions, do your best to do the best you can to answer them, and don't make them out to be this awful person for not knowing, or because at the end of the day, most parents in hockey have multiple kids who play multiple sports, who have jobs, and who have, so many other things on their plate that they're trying to to worry about or do. And so the more you can calm the fears of those parents who don't have the mental bandwidth to think about the youth hockey journey all the time, like the overall experience, I think, will be better for everybody. So like the more you invest from a time and an effort standpoint into being proactive and being open to feedback, it goes a long way. And you'll probably have the amount of crazy emails that you get. Or dissatisfied emails that you get from parents that are out there. So, all right, put a bow on that one. So we talked about tryouts. We talked about parent partnerships. Now let's talk about continue to play. And so, guys, like we've talked about, and I've talked about a lot on social media and even on this podcast, how we are really leaning into rec hockey, house hockey, whatever you want to call it. And, I think people talk about rec and house hockey like it's the redheaded stepchild of hockey nowadays, when in reality, it's the most important part of hockey. And, we've gone through and we've looked at the numbers through USA Hockey and Hockey Canada. And we don't necessarily have a growth problem. There's a lot of kids that are trying hockey, through the NHL Learn to Play program, through Try Hockey for Free, through USA Hockey. There's a lot of good growth and initiatives that are going on. We're doing a pretty bad job at retention and keeping people in the sport, particularly when you're talking about boys. And so I think a lot of this has to do with the lack of, the grassroots, bottom of the pyramid attention that seemingly everybody is not giving to it. So, Matt, you and I have had a ton of conversations on this. This is something I know you're extremely, extremely passionate about. I'll ask you two questions. Number one, why do you think house/rec hockey is the redheaded stepchild of hockey and not enough people are paying attention to it? And number two, what are some things that you've seen, or what are some ways of thinking about that grassroots development type of hockey that you think we could be doing a better job of to help grow that sector of the game?
Okay. Yeah.
And I just put a quarter in the jukebox here, so get ready. We've given ourselves time limits for each of these things, and I don't know if Matt's going to abide by that on this one. But
I'll keep it under control. I'll keep it under control here. Well, you said it pretty well. 8U has never been better. By the early teens, our numbers are disconnected from that growth at the 8U level. And we're about to be cooking with
6U, even 6U up, right? Like, yeah.
We're about to be cooking with gasoline, with all these gold medals and the buzz that's out there, hopefully, for the game. So I expect 8U will continue to improve. The concern that I think our current numbers indicate is that may not guarantee great numbers at 12, 13, 14, 15, because right now they aren't guaranteeing those. So improving that continue to play span is at the heart of this. Why does it get that reputation? I think as soon as a kid finishes Learn to Play and that first sort of entry level experience, it's a race to the crazy finish line. And there are a lot of incentive structures in place sort of outside the family unit that sort of drive more 12 months, more commitment, more energy, more time,
more cost,
more is the answer really quick. And I think a lot of people get whiplash, and that's why, frankly, that's the first attrition cliff. But that takes a toll over time. And I think developing, a house rec system that walks players across those attrition cliffs with programming options and models that continue to inspire families who are curious about the game, but not yet fully invested. The family wants to balance as many sports as they can for as long as they can. The family who just finished Learn to Play and then immediately feels that hustle into a very different experience. The obvious financial and commitment costs. I think we're a sport that's fumbling that baton a little bit right now between those amazing 8U numbers and cultivating lifelong players. House hockey is not a tantalizing term, but I think rebranding as rec developmental options that allow more players to stay in the game longer, to have a similar experience to the one they just finished with Learn to Play, which is awesome right now. Awesome on ice experience. All the kids love it. it's been really great traveling around, seeing a lot of the, to your point, that there are some creative ideas out there. And I think, breaking the mold on that hustle to the top of the pyramid, to the apex behavior pattern, and making it sure that the first wicket, the first box we check is fun. Fun. You need a ringleader, a carnival barker. We've met some great characters out there who are the fun. Police is the wrong word, because police implies, some degree of seriousness, but the fun maestro, who can inject life and culture, create creative cultural and social initiatives that sort of run parallel to the on ice experience, a healthier financial viability of those models. We've seen a lot of solutions out there in the house world. And it's been great collecting those ideas and sharing them with others in our network, because we have seen some people really moving the needle on this issue. For all the great work that USA Hockey and the NHL and everybody, from 10,000 feet to help the AU numbers, attrition, retention is really a local problem. And finding people at the grassroots who can help build those bridges is huge.
Absolutely. I think a couple of the things that we've learned, as it relates to that, I'm on this, I don't know if soapbox is the right word, but like, maybe at that level, we focus almost too much on development and not enough on the fun, like it's about experience at the end of the day. And I think of, one of the partners that we have, Dryland Development Project, and they've grown, they're in the Boston area, and their main thing is rec hockey. And they have gotten people who are like in the tier 1 world that are like, what are they doing over there? That looks like a lot of fun. And they're even getting involved in it, which like everywhere else, it's like, oh my God, we can't do that. And I think about their mentality, and it's like, it's just a freaking riot. Like, you are so jacked to get to the rink, and it's just such a fun experience that these kids have, doing a national anthem, at the beginning of different things, having certain prizes, for different things, refs get Chipotle gift cards, there's so many fun things that we got to like focus on the experience. And like you talk about retention, like we can't like obviously totally have development go to the wayside, but like we got to be thinking about the experience that these kids are having. Would you agree with that?
I think it's the connection between, and I know you didn't mean to make this distinction, but just to clarify, I know you believe this, but a precursor for development is fun. You show me something that's not fun, I'll show you a kid who's going to stop developing, because he's going to stop showing up. So Dryland has taken the approach that the first obligation, the highest order obligation, is fun. And from there, development will occur and community will occur and growth.
And guess what? Their numbers, I don't know if we've had any other people that we know as far as growth is concerned, like their numbers are insane.
Yep.
Absolutely insane.
So fun is not disconnected. It is not the antithesis of development. I know you weren't making that point, but I think it's the precursor to development. Development can very much still exist, but are you answering the fun question first? Because you can hustle off and focus on development and forget to keep it fun, and that's maybe why we're seeing the numbers go the way they are, frankly, at those older ages.
And you think about like just even from like a fun development standpoint, like you can work on your skating, but you can also do races. Right? Like there's a difference between those two. You can work on your edges, or you can play tag. You're going to work on your edges more playing tag than you are going to be going around cones. You can work on your shooting, or you can do scoring competitions, where you have targets, or, the amount of times you hit the net, like and then the enthusiasm piece of it. This is where you talk about, like at the beginning, Maddie, like the person leading the charge and the coaches that are out there, their enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm is going to be contagious. And so do you have a mayor in the lobby that's welcoming all the parents and helping them to understand what's going to be going out on the ice? Do you have, a mayor that's on the ice that's, herding cats, but also, helping the coaches and just, by example, just being very enthusiastic and having fun themselves? Like those things are really important. Those things are really important. And if you want to grow the game and you want to grow your organization, and that's like the biggest thing, it's kind of funny. Like everybody's like, we can't grow. Well, like we're actually, when you look at the macro numbers, the growth is not like we're doing okay. It's the retention. It's the retention that we're not doing a great job at. And, even from a cost analysis perspective, like it's a lot cheaper to keep a person in your organization than it is to go out and get a new one, So, yeah, man, all these things I think are really important. And then Steph, I'd love to get your take on this too, on the admin side. What are some things that you've seen? What are some things that you've done that have really helped, kind of like keep kids in the game, keep costs down, and really focus on this kind of like rec house model?
Well, it's funny what you guys just talked about, because you say it on the podcast all the time, Toph. The high end players, coaches, people in hockey that you talk to on the podcast, the one thing they all have in common, and you say it all the time, is that they love the game. They love playing hockey. They love the game. Well, you can't stay in love with a game if you're not having fun doing it. And that doesn't mean that there's never hardship. There's never the opportunity to fall and get back up and fail and be resilient. All those things are important. That's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about at the youngest ages, where it's about so much more than how good at 6 are you with your edges? How good are you? Can you play a full ice game and stay on side? Like that stuff doesn't matter at that age. It just doesn't. And so a lot of this goes back to, again, communication, right? From the standpoint of what's the expectation and what's your culture from an administrative standpoint? What messaging are you sending to the people that are coming to your game, regardless of their age? Is there a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old that's coming to the game for the first time and they're in your learn to skate or your learn to play? And do you have a place for them? If you don't have a place for them, that's the first opportunity to say, okay, we can be better, because it shouldn't matter at what age they're finding our game. We should be the vehicle that helps them fall in love and stay in love with the game. So as a club, really figuring out what that looks like. And you guys have said it. I mean, Scott and the gang at DDP are just absolutely killing it with their creative, thinking outside the box ways to keep people loving the game. And I believe it's a direct result of, in their area, it cannot possibly also be bringing people to the game or back to the game. That's the piece that we really haven't asked them about, is are there kids and families that either left the town they were playing for because it just wasn't fun anymore, and this is all they're doing now because it is fun. If we care about the future of hockey, we have to care about how many kids keep playing it at the administrative level. You can't just care about how many elite players we're producing for everybody from USA Hockey on down. That's a great byproduct. But if we're doing it the right way, we're putting our focus first on keeping kids playing, and whatever that looks like. And I will say it's easy for us to sit here and say all of this, knowing that there are a lot of rules and regulations in place at affiliate levels that can make it very difficult for club administrators to replicate what DDP is doing in Massachusetts. That won't necessarily work everywhere exactly as they're doing it, because rules are in place, as we all know. A lot of rules exist for the people that would manipulate them to have a desired outcome in a win column, right? So it's about doing what's best for you and your org and your community where you're at, and figuring out what that fun can look like at the house level. What are you allowed to do? Is everything an IP program and you're offering something, something fun, something carnival like, something with music? I mean, whatever the vehicle is for you, it's going to look a little different no matter where you are. So I do want to say that it's not like we're saying to club administrators, here, this is a really easy thing you should be focusing on. It might not be as easy as we're making it sound, but it's not prohibitive either. Don't let that be the crutch and the excuse. There are ways you can accomplish what we're talking about and make it the fun experience it can be that keeps people loving the game.
Yeah, totally. And when we talk with a lot of our member clubs, our partner clubs, and when we talk with a lot of people, and I know the NHL is in on this, I know USA Hockey is in on this, like, how can we make sure that rec hockey, how can we make sure that this continues to grow? How can we make this a thing again? In so many different places, it's dying a slow death, and that is not good for the growth or retention, particularly the retention of our sport. And so this is a thing that we are going to continue to shout on the rooftops for, because we continue to hear it. The NHL continues to hear it. USA Hockey continues to hear it. The costs, they're out of control. The early professionalization, it's out of control. So many of these things that lead to more people playing and staying in our sport, we got to fix. And a lot of that fix has to do with really putting that focus on the base of the pyramid. And that's what we are going to be working a lot on coming up here in 2026, as we've said. So really putting that focus on continue to play grassroots, house, rec hockey, whatever it is you want to call it. Let's go. We got to do a better job of that. So that is number 3. Number 4, I'm going to change the order a little bit to how I introduced it. But let's talk about youth hockey boards. And again, we have so many partner clubs that we work with, and their boards are all different shapes and sizes. There's not one right way. Some boards are more of working boards. Some boards are a little bit less official. They're just kind of there to dot the I's and cross the T's, because they have administrators who are paid, that do a lion's share of the work, as opposed to a purely volunteer board that has to be working, and everybody has roles and responsibilities and stuff. And so, Steph, why don't we start with you on this one? You've been involved in youth hockey for a long time in a lot of different capacities, and now doing what we do, so immersed with different youth hockey clubs around North America. What are some key things that you feel like you've learned in your experience of doing what we're doing, that you think would be helpful to talk about here as it relates to the board? Because the board is at the top, and it sets the tone, and is a huge part of everybody's experience within a youth hockey organization.
Well, strong organizations start with functional boards. I mean, full stop. That's what it takes. And that's not entirely different, from the business world, regardless of what kind of board structure you have. If it's not functioning well, if it's not aligned, it's going to be really hard to have anything that flows from that be functional, or operating at its full capacity either. And that's one of the things I would say that I knew when I was living in it, but also as we work with our partners, the health of the entire club oftentimes comes down to the effectiveness of the board. And it's not the sexy stuff, but it's the essential stuff. Toph, you just wrote a blog not too long ago, the 5 things I wish everyone knew about youth hockey boards. We'll put it in the show notes. It's a must read for everyone in youth hockey, I think. Being on a board, it's not an easy gig. The blog post talks about that. And we see that in real time with our partners. The board sets the direction of the organization. Most of the board members are volunteers trying their best. They probably put their hand up when nobody else was willing to. Board governance versus operations. Really, honestly, boards should be the ones steering the ship, not rowing the boat. And alignment between the board and your hockey leadership, whatever structurally that looks like. If it's not aligned, you're kind of sunk before you really even before you really even start. So that's all, the boards that are focusing on the long-term health of the org and everything that we've talked to up until this point goes into that bucket, right? The long-term health of the org is, player retention. It's their culture. It's the financial stability. It's the community reputation. It's all of those things. And if the board isn't aligned in a way to help all of those things run as effectively and efficiently as possible, it makes the job of the people on the board a lot harder and makes the confusion more likely to happen.
Totally. And I want to kind of reiterate one of the things that you talked about, Steph, and that was kind of, and we talk about this a lot, a little bit of a clear separation of church and state as it relates to admin roles and hockey roles. When there is kind of two different working groups, one's in charge of the hockey decisions, whether that's a paid hockey director, paid coaching staffs, things like that, or somebody, if you don't pay your people that are involved in the organization, just a leader on the hockey side and then a leader on the admin side. When those are aligned, as you said, and they work together, that's really, really good. When you have people on the board who get on the board who don't know much about hockey but want to have a say in hockey decisions, but particularly maybe only if it's for their kid, which happens 100%. That's where you get a lot of, oh, this board is political. Oh, you get of the board doesn't have the best interests of everybody. The board's just, people get on the board for their kid or their financial interests or whatever. And so that is something that we've seen, like when you have and a lot of clubs, particularly volunteer clubs, and you see this a lot in Minnesota, they have like a hockey development committee. And that hockey development committee is in charge of hockey decisions. And then you have your admin board, which is in charge of, financial decisions and, all the admin stuff that goes along with rink management and, equipment and whatever, right? So like when you have that two clear distinctions of roles and responsibilities, and they are aligned on how they feel that hockey should be delivered within the club, that goes a long way. When those get murky, that's when you see a lot of problems. Maddie, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, that Minnesota reference is one of the ways we see the org chart breaking down. Another is with a real clear allocation of hats. So you've got a working board and everyone has a second job title. You're not just board member, you're also, 10U coordinator. You're also, you're not just a board member, you're also in charge of communications. And then people are onboarded and trained and held accountable to those hats. So that's another really healthy way of doing it. The sad truth is a lot of organizations throughout the country, the folks that we work with, folks that we bump into, the hats go to the most adept, the person who's willing to take those hats.
90% of the work typically is done by 10% of the people on a lot of youth hockey boards.
Yeah.
100%.
Anyone who puts their hand up and volunteers to serve in youth sports in 2026, I think is deserving of our thanks and maybe some psychiatric help. It's a hard job. It's a thankless job. We try to, it's not a gimmick. I mean, we try to end every call with thank you, like a sincere thank you, because we know damn well they're not going to hear it the rest of the week. So we take the approach that, as we work with our partners, we want to help them with efficiency, with limited time, limited energy, limited patience. These folks are dedicating a few hours of their week. How can they dedicate those hours most effectively? And we look at things like aligning the mission, aligning the vision, the habits and infrastructures to allow for success. So it's boring as hell, but like a bylaw review, how do our habits match our rules? And do either our rules or our habits need to change? A mission statement review. What's our North Star? Do we all see it? Like when we look up in the sky, do we all see the same? Are we all looking at the same star? Onboarding. You got volunteers. They put their hand up and then they spend a year figuring out, again, inventing a system. My daughter with the double knots, in her shoes, inventing a system in a otherwise not super healthy board environment. And they spend a year figuring out how the world works. and they come to the conclusion, I'm purely decoration here. So, onboarding, and then sort of running parallel to that again, as you mentioned, the committee and org chart, the allocation of those hats, can everyone pull their share of the rope? The healthiest clubs have a clear distribution of that workload. The clubs that struggle to grow, it's because there's only 2 or 3 people really doing the work.
And the healthiest clubs also have, at the board level, they have a really good understanding of the importance of the continuity year to year. So how are they onboarding their new board members? But even before that, how are they
presenting themselves?
Presenting themselves, yeah.
And people want to actually get on the board, yeah.
And who are they recruiting? I mean, is it just anybody that wants to put their hand up can run for the board, which is fine. But if you have a clear that we need somebody with this skill set to do these things on our board, while I might offer to volunteer for the board, if it's a accounting, finance background, I'm not your person. I'm not going to fill that role as well as, Susie can, but here's where my skill set lies. So maybe I'm not on the board this year. Maybe I'm on a working committee, but any parent that's willing to put their hand up, one of the things I always said too, when a parent came up to us with a complaint, but came with a complaint or a question in a reasonable way, right? We'll just leave it at that. I figured out a way to gently encourage them to volunteer. Like one of my good friends said, well, I can't complain about the process if I don't first volunteer my time to be part of the solution. And I used her as an example moving forward because she had some very valid solution ideas. And she had some questions that I took as an opportunity to say, you're like the 5th or 6th parent that has had this same question. And instead of getting irritated at you, I'm going to take that as a sign that I'm not effectively communicating this thing. So she put her hand up, and together we worked to sort of address that thing. And so boards that are really aware of where they can put the talent that's presenting itself also seem to have more success than the boards that are just, not really sure what gaps exist and what holes need to be filled and who's the best. We talk about it all the time, the right person in the right seat on the right bus. That's true for boards. Big time.
And I think, to put a bow on this, Steph, you were with me, and the guy's name, it was Ryan something. It's evading me, but when we went and I spoke at that Michigan high school coaches conference. Yeah, no, but the guy's name who spoke, he works with the Vikings coaching staff. He's like the coach of the coaches.
Yeah, the coach of the coaches, the guy that had the sciatic issue.
Yeah, he was struggling.
Yeah,
he was in pain, but he was such a great speaker, and he talked about leadership groups in a way that I thought was so profound, and I think would really be helpful. And we talk about this with a lot of the clubs that we partner with, and that's leadership groups have to have 3 things: alignment, assignment, and execution. Alignment, assignment, and execution. Everybody that's on the board has to be aligned with the mission. Like, this is the way that we do things. This is our North Star. This is what we believe in. And this is, this is who we are as a group. Alignment. Assignment. Everybody's got to have a role or a responsibility to that mission. Steph, what you just said, the right people, what was it? The right people on the right bus. What was it? The right seat on the right bus. Yeah.
On the right bus.
If you have that, and that's where kind of recruiting, if you are the director of finance or accounting, is there another person that, maybe they got a kid that's a little younger in the organization that has that background? Maybe we bring that person in a little bit. We show them what we do, and that recruitment piece to it. So, roles and responsibilities, alignment, assignment, and then execution. Things got to get done. And this is alignment and assignment. Typically, clubs are pretty good at that ish. Obviously depends. Some are better than others, but typically people are pretty good at those. The execution piece is where a lot of people fall off the rails. because there's a lot of things that got to get done, particularly if you're a volunteer board and you have a million other things going on in your own life for your kids and all that. There's a lot of things that got to get done for a youth hockey association to operate. And so things get left behind. People don't do their job. People aren't adhering to their responsibilities. And so when one person doesn't do their job, there's always a cascading effect, and that affects the next person, and that affects the next person, and that affects the next person. And so what we really try to help clubs with is, how can we put an accountability structure in place? How can we really, really, really make sure that the assignment piece is locked down so people know exactly what it is that they have to do to make sure that the things are getting done. And so if you're really good at alignment, making sure everybody's on the same page and how we're doing this, assignment, these are my jobs that I have to do, and then execution, I am doing those jobs that I've been given, then you have, for the most part, a pretty good working board, I would say. So alignment, assignment, and execution. And I would encourage everybody that's on a board, or part of a leadership group, to think about those three things. How aligned are you? How are you in divvying up your roles and responsibilities? And then what's your accountability structure to make sure that those things are getting done? I think if you just did that exercise, you would be able to have a lot of great, just like 10,000 foot view thoughts of how you can better your board, which will better your organization. So great stuff there, guys. Great stuff there. And now the last thing that we're going to talk about here, and we put this last because honestly, like the first four, you can't have any of those without this fifth one. Like the fifth one is kind of like the blood, that gives the oxygen to everything that breathes within an organization. And that is communication, healthy communication. This is something that a lot of groups really struggle with from a lot of different standpoints. And we can probably do an entire podcast on communicate, how to healthily communicate, with your coaches, with your kids, with your parents, and how that sets a vision and how you hold people accountable. And there's so many different ways to go with it. But I think, again, being proactive in your communication is really important, not just reactive. Set the tone. Don't let the tone set you as a leadership group. And then also, how are you communicating your vision? How do people know what you're about? How do people then know the processes of how you're executing on the things that you're about? The more that we can communicate with our families, the less confusion there's going to be, Steph, as you talked about a little bit earlier, because it's very easy to be confused in youth sports as a parent. And I think the more, honestly, from a positive standpoint, the more camaraderie you're going to build within your club, the better experience people are going to have. And so, Maddie, we'll start with you on this one. Like, what are some tricks of the trade? What are some things that you've seen from some of the partner clubs that we work with that have really helped to move the needle from a positive standpoint in how they approach communication within their club?
Well, I think it's two things. It's exactly what you said. It's drawing that straight line from your mission statement, your vision statement, to communications. Like that, there are not a lot of dots between those two. I think some clubs make the mistake of we'll get to communications later, or that'll take care of itself in the aggregate. But to your point, are you defining your organization, or is someone else doing it? What are we about? And the second, I think, is they do a pretty good job of looking in the mirror. There are a lot of communication methods. It can feel overwhelming, feels overwhelming to me at times. The website, the emails, the group chats, the apps, social media, 12 different types of social media. So it's a question of what we do, where we do it, how often we do it. There's some logistics concerns. We talk about this every week as an enterprise. But again, it all starts with cultural alignment. Once the logistics stuff is done, you go here for the calendar, you go here for the coach updates, you go here for the sign up stuff, you go here for the elementary educational resources. Once that routine of stuff is done, what are we about? Because you show me what you celebrate, and I'll show you what you value. And I think clubs do a good job of looking in the mirror here, have a good understanding of what they're putting out into the world. Do we celebrate progress? Do we celebrate results? Do we celebrate highlights? Do we celebrate all of our squads or maybe just our older or more advanced ones? Is the measurement of celebration purely on ice, or do we value aspects of the off-ice experience? If someone didn't know my organization, but they saw only a week of our communications, a month of our communications, what values are we exuding? Pride, gratitude, community, achievement. All of the above is fine, but it means you're going to have to paint the entire canvas, and you're going to have a lot of people contributing to that. So it's an organizational and a staffing, a collaborative challenge before it's a practical one. But I think clubs that know what they're aiming at, that are deeply connected with their mission statement, they tend to have the most success here.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Steph, how about you?
Yeah, communication solves or creates most problems in an org. And, to Maddie's point, communication isn't just emails. It's not even just all the electronic stuff, right? It's
Right.
Leadership accessibility. Do you have somebody, when a family is first coming to your organization, they're going to get, to Maddie's point, they're going to get all the logistics stuff, right? Because they come in the door when they're supposed to, usually. With what they need usually. But the communication piece is bigger than that. It's, do they feel welcomed? Is there somebody from the board that's, whose job it is to be in the lobby welcoming new families?
The mayor. There's got to be a mayor of every lobby.
Mayor, exactly. It's leadership or hockey director to coach clarity, and it's coach to parent clarity, right? I mean, that's important, and that's not going to be effective just with emails and just with whatever information is coming from the club logistically, or out on social media, whatever. It's more intentional than that. And to Maddie's point, the consistency of messaging, obviously a big one. But if it's a leadership group that is silent in some aspects, that's going to create speculation, and then that's what I mean by the lack of communication can create some problems, because without the messaging the organization wants to be putting out there, parents will fill in the gaps on their own, right, wrong, indifferent. So and you don't know who, depending on the size of your org, you don't know who's out there creating your narrative. That's the most dangerous thing in business or for a club, right? Is your silence is allowing others to create who you are. And that's really difficult territory to come back from. You end up spinning your wheels a lot at the org level, at the administration level, if you're not controlling that. And I mean controlling in a positive way. So almost every issue we see in our partners tracks back to communication. Whether it's rumors, misaligned expectations, silence from leadership, the tryout process, whatever it is, it all can be traced back to a deficiency or just an opportunity to be better in communicating what you actually meant, who you actually are, what the expectations actually should be. It's a really good accountability piece, but oftentimes, we've already said so many board members are volunteers, right? They get so bogged down. They just sort of, there are some opportunities missed in the world of communication. And that's an area where a club, I think, can always be better.
One of the biggest missed opportunities, and Steph, I didn't mean to lean so much on the electronic, but you're right, the face-to-face communication. We just talked about continue to play. One of the biggest missed communication opportunities that I've seen firsthand, and we see from a lot of our larger partners and clubs that we talk to out there, is the baton being passed from learn to play to continue to play, the next thing. I can't tell you how many kids go through learn to play and it's silence at the end of learn to play.
Yeah, and then it's like, what's next? There's
they don't know what's next.
Follow-up.
Yeah. And you talk about a captive audience. I mean, you're shooting fish in the barrel in that environment. Everyone's happy. No one's complaining about ice time. They're just curious. Like, that's the least fraught mayoral meeting environment I could imagine in the youth hockey world, and we still aren't doing that one well. Like, I get the hockey director not wanting to do a meeting 2 days after tryouts. Okay, like that's you're gonna have to get your wife to start the car in the morning, but to not talk to the learn to play people. I mean, there are missed opportunities all over the place, and to Steph's point, most of the issues we see trace back to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got a couple things to add to what you guys are saying too. I think, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but communication is also a two-way street. To be effective with communication, you have to be good at proactively communicating what is important to you, but you also have to be a good listener. You have to be a good listener. And so the clubs that we work with that are really good at listening and then following through on some of the changes that they keep hearing need to be made, like those are the healthiest clubs that we have and that we collaborate with. It is absolutely a two-way street. Parents feel, comfortable with voicing their opinion. And if you talk to a lot of hockey parents, that's one of the biggest gripes they have, particularly when you get to the tier 1 level and it gets a little bit more serious. It's like, man, I better sit down and shut up, or else, my kid's hockey career is going to get, they're going to derail them. And so I think communication being a two-way street and making sure you're listening, whether you do, monthly check-ins with each team for the coaches, whether you do monthly town halls, whether you Zoom or in person, where you can get feedback from different people. You just have to have check-ins. You have to ask. You have to be in the lobby understanding what's going on. I've talked to Gino Cavallini about this. You talk about, the cream of the crop as far as tier 1 is concerned. Gino runs the Mission, which has been a gold standard, one of them. And I've talked to him a lot about it, and like, why is the Mission so successful? It's because he's a great mayor in the lobby. He's a great mayor in the lobby. He's always in the lobby. He's talking to parents. He's a very affable guy. And so like that stuff matters. That stuff really, really, really matters. And then the other thing too is, I go back and forth on this, but I do think there's a lot of value add to this, because I think a couple of the clubs that we've partnered with have really leaned into it, and that's using social media. Gone are the days, like if you're just sending a monthly email newsletter to your parents, it ain't getting read. Like very few people are actually going to read it. But if you can use social media, not only on the logistical side, like, hey, registrations, let's go, or, hey, this and that, volunteer opportunity, whatever it is, but also like from a cultural, environmental standpoint, I think every club should have like a director of social media, and they should have somebody on every team that like after wins, they're taking a picture of the team and sending it to them that they can get up on social media on Instagram. Like even like little things like when the kids are like getting ready to go out on the ice, or like highlight reel goal, whatever, right? Like there's so many different things that, what was the line you said, Maddie? Like what you celebrate, what was it?
Show me what you celebrate and I'll show you what you value.
Exactly. Right. So if you are putting stuff on social media of the things that you celebrate, like all the fun that the kids are having, and the experiences, and maybe there's some fun parent stuff that you're doing, whatever, like, celebrating those things, it gets people excited, and it's great marketing for new kids to come into the program. It makes parents feel excited about being a part of the program. And so kind of like using social media, I think can be a value add too. But the biggest thing for me is it's got to be a two-way street. You have to be able to proactively communicate, but you have to listen. As crazy as some of the questions that you're going to get, don't get so bogged down with the 10% crazy, fulfill.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, fulfill the needs of the 90%, that are not the crazy, that just need a little bit of time.
Outstanding point on the two-way street piece. And I think something that I've started to learn recently, we help obviously immensely with our partners on the listening piece. We do postseason surveys for coaches and parents. It's become apparent to me going through a few cycles of this, how few organizations feel any sense of reliability in their mayoral skills, their ongoing information flow. Because as we're getting into survey season, I'm hearing from partners that are treating this as information gathering and not as aggregate trends. So to your point about ongoing communication, being an ongoing listener, having a great mayor, utilizing team managers, utilizing your coaches, having healthy dialogue chains all over the place, maybe having coordinators within your board who focus on specific age cohorts, to really keep their ear to the ground with that particular group. I think there's a lot of tricks that you need to probably do in the aggregate in order to keep your thumb on the pulse. But whether it's that big survey at the end of the year or the ongoing stuff, you're 100% right. Being a good listener is a big piece of the communication side.
And one more thing, because you just said it, and I should have too. When you think about like the communication that goes from club leadership down to parent, a lot of times, how does that happen? It happens with a mass email to everybody, which is easy, doesn't take a whole lot of time. But when it comes to actual efficacy, again, like not many people are going to read it fully. Most will either skim or think that my spouse is going to read it, so I'll just ask them, or, it's not the most efficient or effective way to communicate things. Who do people actually listen to though? They listen to their team managers. They listen to their team managers because their team managers, Steph, you are one right now for Jake's 18U team.
Not anymore. I'm retired.
That's true. Season's over.
Retired.
She is retired. But like, empower your managers. Like, you have to have a great relationship and a great pulse with your managers as a board and as a leadership group, because those are the people that the families are really truly listening to, because they're so much more closer to the ground, especially when it comes to like logistical things. And so like they very much listen to their managers. So if you want to get points across and it needs to go from point A to point C, A to B to C is a great way of doing it. Top to managers, filter it through.
Yep, 100%.
It's an army. It's a trusted army. It's a trusted army at the end of the day. All right, guys.
We got to give Steph a little shout out here. She just mentioned retiring as team manager. She's the only one on the call who has an undefeated youth hockey coaching record as emergency head coach during a suspension. I got some losses on my record, Toph. I'm sure you do too.
Oh, yeah.
Undefeated.
Undefeated. Anybody
That's
needs
awesome.
an 18U AAA coach? I am undefeated. My record speaks for itself.
I love it. Well, hey, look, guys, one of the things that we do is we have a referral program, and it's on our website. We'll make sure that we put it in the show notes. But if you are a parent who feels like, or a coach who feels like your organization could use a little bit of help, and it's funny because so many of the clubs that we work with, we have some that are at a 0. They're a disaster. They need help getting from like a 0 to a 3. And then there's others that we partner with that do a phenomenal job. They're at like an 8 or a 9 and they want to be a 10. How can you help us move the needle to be even a little bit better? And so a lot of how we partner with people is parents who listen to the podcast, coaches who listen to the podcast, maybe even people who are on a board that listen to the podcast who reach out to us through this referral program, and they put their name and somebody with their organization's contact information, and we can reach out to them to potentially partner up and create some positive value for them. So we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. So if you feel like your organization needs a little bit of support, can use a little bit of perspective, whatever it is, just fill out that referral. It's really, really easy. It'll take you 15 to 20 seconds, guys. And then we'll get to work on starting that relationship. But at the end of the day, hopefully we've given you some stuff that can provide some perspective on the ins and outs of what goes on in the youth hockey world, with the 5 biggest things that we've learned in youth hockey this year as it relates to tryouts, as it relates to parent, not education, parent partnership, and also as it relates to the continue to play model, the house rec stuff, functioning board, how to best communicate. These are things that we're very, very passionate about. We want to make sure that the hockey world is as healthy of a place as we can, and we continue to grow the game. And not just that, but we retain kids and families in our game, because that's where we're struggling the most. And I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about here today are really good, retention vehicles to be able to do that. So for everybody that's out there, as Maddie said earlier at the end of our calls, a huge thank you. Thank you for all that you do in your environment that you're in this youth hockey or just hockey world. We appreciate everything that you do. And if there's anything that we can do to help support what you're doing, just reach out and let us know. But have a great week, and we love you.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is built for the fastest game on ice. With player drops and live betting, every shift, every shot, every save gives you options to get in on the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. 21 plus in most states, void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer, copyright 2026, NHL, all rights reserved.